Welcome to Talking with the Experts. This is where we discuss great ideas to take your business to the next level. How do we know these ideas work? Well, it's because we're talking with business owners who are using these ideas. Business owners who have years of experience and expertise. All things business by business owners for business owners. And now, here is your host, Rose Davidson.
Hi, I'm Rose Davidson from Talking with the Experts. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Global Glamping Charities for their valued support. Global Glamping Charities, solving homelessness in all its forms. Reach out to them at globalglamping.org.
Talking with the Experts.
In episode 455, Mary Clavieres discusses with us how understanding the way we think impacts our businesses.
If someone's very analytical, I'll give you one example between two different people. So if you have a very analytical person and you have a very relational quadrant person, right? So one person is very much into the facts and the other person is very much into the feelings. And they go to a meeting together and the person with the facts is like, okay, let's just start this meeting right away. Here's what we're doing. This is what we're working on. This is the problem. And how are we going to fix it, right? And the person on the feeling side could be like, wanting to chit chat a little bit. Like, hey, how you doing? How was your weekend? Like, what's going on with you, right? And so then there's this clash of like this one person, and I'm an engineer, so I feel like I can say this because I do have the analytical part to me and the people part. But the analytical person or more of the technical type person might be like, let's just get on with the show, right? And the feelings person is thinking like, hey, but you don't even want to have a conversation. That's so impersonal. Like
Talking with the Experts.
Hello, welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners. You can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And I have a very special guest today, all the way from France, Mary Clavieres. And she's going to be sharing with us how to scale your business in a sustainable way using whole brain methodology. Now, I've not heard of this, but Mary's going to enlighten us as to what that is. So Mary brings her 14 plus years of experience at a Fortune 100 pharmaceutical company to transform teams through her change management consulting company. She provides individualized support from small businesses to Fortune 100 companies in order to help them build stronger teams and operate their businesses more strategically. Mary also hosts the Brief Transition podcast, covering life's big changes related to career, parenting, and health. She has been featured in media outlets including Forbes, Business Insider, NPR, Thrive Global, Authority Magazine, and on NBC News. Welcome, Mary. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Rose. Thank you so much for having me.
So firstly, I'd like you to tell me a little bit about what is the whole brain methodology.
Right. Okay. So whole brain methodology, it's tied to something called the Herrmann Brain Dominance Instrument from Herrmann International. And it's an assessment tool that measures the way you prefer to think. So I know a lot of people are into personality assessments and things that tell them how they are. This one, it's a bit different because it measures how you process and prefer to think. So if you're problem solving or communicating or, working through something, it's really about what's going on in your brain, not necessarily personality traits of how you act. And so the whole brain methodology is something that's applied from that you can use really for anything, for strategy, for project management, for communication. There's tons of applications, which is something I love about it. But really, at the end of the day, it's measuring how you prefer to think, how team members prefer to think, or even loved ones. it can go a lot of different ways.
So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. There's, human design. There's, oh, I don't know what's, oh my God, I'm brain dead. I just did one recently. I can't remember what it's called.
No, like the Enneagram. There's tons of stuff.
Yeah, that's
Tons of
that
stuff.
one. And there's, oh, I don't know, there's others that measure your personality and supposedly tell you how you think. But with this whole brain methodology, is it good for people to use if they've got a mental disorder such as bipolar or depression or anxiety or PTSD or any of those things? Does it change the answers each time they do it, or does it stay the same? It doesn't matter?
So it shouldn't change answers unless you take it before and after some type of big life event that might change your answers or dictate your answers in a different way. It's not really recommended for kids or younger people just because they're not as fully developed, but anybody else really can take it. And in terms of if it's helpful for everyone, I mean, I personally think so. I'm not a doctor, so it depends, what doctors also suggest, but I think it's a really practical tool to be able to ground you in understanding each of the quadrants. Basically, it's made up of 4 quadrants in the brain. So analytical thinking style, experimental, relational, and more of systems and like implementation, the structural thinking quadrant. So being aware of all 4 of those, no matter, where you tend to live in terms of how you think, is the first step. And then, I think it's helpful for everybody in different ways.
Yeah, it's really good to understand the way we think, because it can impact the way that we run our businesses, we run our families, we run our, teams within our business, friendships, all those sorts of things. So how can this methodology, how do we understand it so it helps us?
Yeah. So the first part is understanding the basics of the 4 quadrants. So I briefly mentioned them, but I can kind of share a little bit about what's in each of them.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So the first one is, if you picture, I know we're on audio, but if you picture a square or even a circle cut up into 4 pieces. So there's basically 4 quadrants that I'll go through. The first one is the analytical thinking quadrant. So this one is all about your brain processing data, analytics, rational thinking, problem solving, all of those practical, factual type of things, right? Then there's the B quadrant is the structural thinking quadrant. And this is all about process and systems and taking action and implementing, having procedures, all of that related to and especially, in businesses, for example, really taking action on what you're doing. The C quadrant is the relational quadrant. So this is all about people. It could be relationships of team members. It can be how you look at the marketing, the relationship with your customer or your clients, how you're speaking with them. It's all about people and feelings and emotions and those relationships. And then the D quadrant is the experimental thinking quadrant. And this is much more about the big picture. So the vision, if you think again for a company, the vision, the mission, the purpose, all of those types of things, like your long-term goals, longer-term strategy, directionally where you're going, all of that comes up in this the more creative quadrant. So you put all 4 of those together, and that's what makes up the whole brain. Now, everyone has all 4 parts. You process in some way or another, you're processing with all 4. But the thing is, where do you spend the most of your time? How do you usually process? And that's what gets into then your own profile. And I like to tell people, of course, there's no right or wrong for any of this, right? It's how you think, it's what it is. And you can be very extreme into one quadrant or another. Like you can be very data and analytical, you can be very relationships, whatever it is. But the the key is being aware of all four quadrants and then using all four of those. So even if you prefer to be in one quadrant, how do you stretch and make sure you use the other quadrants? Or how do you have people on your team that can help you in those quadrants where you are not so, you don't have the preference?
Yeah,
right?
you're not as strong in those ones. That you could
Right.
be strong in one totally, and I mean, even though you have to use the other three, probably you could not be as strong in those areas.
Right. And it's like what's typically, so the analytical and the structural thinking quadrants together, they make up what people usually refer to as left brain thinkers, and then the experimental and the relational come together as more of the right brain thinking. And just depending where you are, I mean, you need all of it to run a business, right? You can't ignore the data and the analytics. You can't ignore the people. You can't ignore the vision. You can't ignore the actual implementation. So you really have to be working with all of those in some way, shape, or form.
It's very intriguing, and it could be a lot of benefit to your business if you knew exactly how, what part of your brain that you're strongest in, so that you can actually get people on board in your team that can utilize the other parts that you don't use as much. So it's
Definitely.
really, really interesting how that works out. How can it help us with burnout and all those things that especially startups suffer from, because they all things to all people?
Yeah. So I think it's very similar, because basically what you want to do at the end of the day is you want to understand where your preferences lie, right? And then if you have team members, especially if you're a small team, understanding where other people on the team, where their preferences lie. So there's reports for individuals, pairs, and teams. So it's very powerful in terms of reporting and being able to see what everyone else is, and then what's the best way for you to all communicate? What's the best way for you to all work on a project together? So in terms of burnout, I think the first part is the awareness of where are you spending your time and how are you operating right now? And then figuring out who are those other people that can be supporting you, or because typically with burnout, you're stretching too much, right? You're being stretched too thin. So then it's like, okay, where are you going? And there's so many great books and resources I love. But if you think of something like, just being in your zone of genius, right? Or and any of that, then where can you really focus and do your best work? And then where can the other team members fill in for you? But it all starts from really having a process in place and a strategy. And that's a lot of what I teach and what I work with clients on in terms of using the whole brain. So how is your group or your team set up to run? And are they running efficiently with that? Because most of the time, especially in startups, everyone wears so many hats, right? But it's like, how can you figure out what everyone's kind of doing right now, and then work on a process or system to kind of get that in a better order so that you can, everyone can stay really where they work best. And there's a lot that goes into that depending on how the business is running, because it could be that they're floundering with their strategy and kind of changing their mind every other day on what their, priority is or what their goal is. Or it could be a lot with teams. It's very common to have communication breakdowns. So then it's really about how are you communicating with people depending on how they think, right? So it's a whole other interesting avenue of people. If someone's very analytical, I'll give you one example between two different people. So if you have a very analytical person and you have a very relational quadrant person, right? So one person is very much into the facts and the other person is very much into the feelings. And they go to a meeting together, and the person with the facts is like, okay, let's just start this meeting right away. Here's what we're doing. This is what we're working on. This is the problem. And how are we going to fix it, right? And the person on the feeling side could be like, wanting to chit chat a little bit. Like, hey, how you doing? How was your weekend? Like, what's going on with you? Right? And so then there's this clash of like this one person, and I'm an engineer, so I feel like I can say this because I do have the analytical part to me and the people part. But the analytical person or more of the technical type person might be like, let's just get on with the show, right? And the feelings person is thinking like, hey, but you don't even want to have a conversation. That's so impersonal, like, and they're feeling like they've been shut down, because the other person isn't sharing. So there's a lot that can go into that too. So not just to tie it back to burnout, how everybody's operating, but then how can you get to this environment that's more inclusive, right, of all thinking styles, and then operating from a place that really like knows how each individual works and then leverages that for how everyone's working together. And I think that's where you can get out of the firefighting mode that causes burnout and be more in the, proactive and moving forward type of mode.
Yeah, I'm not the type of person that, if I go to a meeting, I just want to hear the facts. I want the meeting to start, finish. If you've got something to say, don't dilly-dally, just tell me whatever it is. Don't tell me this great, huge, long story, because I have no interest in listening to some story. I just want to know what it is and get on with it. But I am a feelings person too, because I do like to have a conversation with people. But yeah, if you're going to tell me something, tell me it in the fewest possible words so that I understand it, and that we can just move on to the next topic.
Right. And imagine when you have a room full of people with all different thinking preferences, like how, out of control that can feel to some people, especially again with like the structured thinking people that really want the agenda and they want to know what's coming versus the super creatives.
Tears, so I
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because, and then the creatives too, with like wanting to brainstorm all the time and like really be out and feeling into that vision. So, it all goes together, but I agree. It
is tough, and it is tough to use all facets of your brain when you're just, wired in one particular way. I used to be president of some social clubs, and we'd go to meetings, and meetings that used to take 2 hours, mine were finished in like 45 minutes or something, because I just tell me what you need to tell me, and let's just get out of here and let's go and have a drink afterwards.
Right. Right, totally. And it just depends. It depends how things are running, but
yeah, they used to call me some terrible names.
Oh, because you were super efficient. That's
pretty much, yeah.
Ridiculous.
Anyway,
but you see how like that's even an example of like, maybe there's something to be done in terms of stretching. Now, you never want to change how you are, right? But when you have the awareness that other people don't, how do you maybe stretch them or bring them into the conversation that in a way that makes them feel comfortable, right? That's what
and then that's the whole thing. It's about inclusion. I mean, so much more now than it was, previously. And we've been talking about inclusive workplaces for years and years and years, since I was like knee-high to a grasshopper. But it's become more of a talked about topic now, because since COVID, people are working from home and they feel more isolated, and you're not having to go into the office so much now because heaps of people are working from home. So how do you have that inclusive work environment when most of us are working remotely now?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And that's a whole thing too. Like I would see a lot during COVID because I used to do a lot of in-person workshops and events. And then during COVID, it was moved all online. And then coming out of COVID, there was like a mix of the two, right? The hybrid and everything. And when you're online, well, I find the trickiest is when you have some people online and some people in the room, because that's really the communication breakdown is very easy to have if you don't have everyone the same. So actually virtually, I prefer to have everyone virtually or have everyone physically in the room, because the two is
it can be a bit of a nightmare. Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, I used to belong to a speaking organization where they would hold hybrid events, and it was really good for the people that were in the room, because they could hear, they could interact, you know. But when you're
Right.
online, you miss out on all that stuff, and you feel
Yep.
excluded and
Exactly.
and ignored. And yeah, so I understand that totally.
Yeah. It makes a big difference. And for anyone online, yeah, then they can't hear. Then you have to ask to repeat. Then you just feel like you're not hearing things, and then it's less engaging. It's a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, so I
totally
left.
agree.
I couldn't deal with it. It's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Anyway, tell me a bit about your podcast, Mary.
Oh, yeah. So the Brief Transitions podcast, it's about changes in life, really. I mean, I work with teams and people all day long around changes and making things, having a better impact in their day-to-day life. And this podcast is another version of it, because I talk about, I share stories really from people that are going through or navigating big changes or have come out the other side, really, because a lot of the times I want them to be talking from a place that's a bit healed so they can help others. So it's really about the ups and downs of, different pieces of career, of parenting, of life, whatever it might be. I've had people on there around health issues like thyroid cancer and breast cancer, and then other topics like creating your own way or living as a digital nomad. So it's a variety, but generally I just think, life is full of so many changes, big ones and little ones. And
Especially now.
yeah. And I just feel like people don't get enough credit for what they're going through every day, So this is really, it's been a great platform to share those stories and help others that might be trying to navigate something similar,
Yeah, sounds really, really interesting. Where can you find the podcast?
On all the major, platforms, but also on brieftransitions.com is my site. But then, Apple, Spotify, Google, and then the other podcasting apps. It should be everywhere. Yeah, Brief Transitions.
I'll go and check it out.
Thank you.
Mary, have you written a book about, the things that you're doing at the moment, or is there a book in the pipeline somewhere?
I have not. The podcast is a first start, I would say. I'm still gathering and collecting and, but perhaps in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the topic is really intriguing, to work out how we think. It's better than the personality things, I think, because I did two tests, two human design questionnaires, and they came out different. I mean, the some of them were the same, like some of the quadrants were the same, but there were changes in two of them, and I thought, oh, how odd was that? I only took them like, I don't know, about 4 months apart or something. So yeah, might have depended what mood I was in.
Yeah, some of the assessments, it really it depends on a lot of factors, or it depends how they ask questions and process it and everything. But I find, with the work that I'm doing and this assessment tool that I use from the Herrmann team, I love that there's so many applications from it. Like, it's not just this is who you are, right? It's this is how you prefer to think. Great, we have that information, so let's do something with it. Right? Instead of just like, I don't know, okay, another test, and you like stick it in your desk drawer or something. And it's really much more around like, how can you implement things? How can you make things better in your business by knowing this information? And that's what I love about it. I mean, it sounds so cheesy when I say it, but I say it anyway. Like, it's a tool that really changed my life. When I first found it, it really changed my life. And I just love it so much. Like, I believe in that so much. I believe in applying things to be able to improve or make better, right? Like, that's how we go through changes and everything. It's all about life. So anyway, but yeah, that's what I love. It's not just like stick it in the desk drawer. It's like, what can you do with this? How can it have your projects run smoother? How can it improve communication in your team? Like, all of that is possible from it. So,
it's really important though, having the knowledge of those things, because even if you're just starting out, you have no team members, you need to know how you think, so that when it comes time for you to bring on team members that you know that those team members are going to fill the void, so to speak, about,
Exactly. That's what I did in the beginning too, because you look at, okay, where do you prefer to think? So that's really where your preferences and probably a lot of your strengths lie, right? So then if you want to have a well-rounded team, okay, let's look at the areas where where you don't have those preferences or maybe not as strong, because that's where you're going to have the most like bang for your buck kind of thing, right? At the same
Absolutely.
time, having people, when you bring people in that are different, what we usually do is we hire similar to us, right? Like you're always like, just because of what you're thinking about, like, and the way you process and the way you think, there's actually ways that you can write job descriptions. So we usually just write job descriptions based on how we think. We don't even think about it. We just write the job description, right? But we're using words and language that's coming from our preferences, our quadrants with our preferences. And really, when you want to hire someone for a different type of role, you have to use different language so that it will attract them based on their thinking preferences, So
yeah, good point. Yeah, that's a lot of what we do when we write. And you're right, write job descriptions. We write them what we want, not how what the other person to be. When we're looking for someone that thinks differently than we do.
Right. Like if you're a big picture thinker, but you need someone to be doing like the details and the implementation and everything, if you write it with things like, just think with like big fluffy words that are around vision, creating this vision or something like that, like that's not going to attract someone that really likes process and structure, right? It's going to, and then you're going to end up with someone that has similar preferences to you that ends up potentially not necessarily liking the type of work that you want them to actually do. So
been there, done that.
All of us have, Rose. All of us have.
Absolutely. Mary, where can people find you if they want to learn more about this this Herrmann thing? And sorry, I lost my train of thought again. And if they want to take the test to find out how they think.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So they can contact me. I'm at maryclavier.com. It's Mary, Mary, and then Clavieres. There's a silent S, very French, even though that's my husband, not me. So maryclavier.com. And I have also an offer. So if anyone is interested in learning more with the assessment, they can go to maryclavier.com/rose. And I have more information there for a strategy session if they're interested.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. Thank you so much. Mary, it's been a pleasure. I would like you, if you will, to share some words of wisdom.
Oh, yeah. Okay. What's the first thing that comes to mind? I guess I'm going to say keep going, because a lot of the times it feels very hard. And I know it as a business owner, as a parent too. And going through any types of changes can feel very hard. So yeah, I guess what I want to say is keep going, because there is something on the other side waiting for you that's even better. And yeah, reach out for support whenever you need it, because in order to keep going, you need to be supported.
Yes, very, very true. There's too many people that are struggling on their own and not reaching out, and causes all sorts of problems. So thank you. They are really great words. Thank you for sharing that. Mary, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've absolutely loved learning about your methodology, and I'm going to go and check it out.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Rose. I really appreciate it. It's been really a lovely conversation.
Wonderful. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time. Talking with the experts.